Hi, and welcome to another episode of Viper nanoCHATs, which is a series dedicated to fostering the critically reflective teaching practice of sharing our experiences with our peers. So I'm Shirley Lin, I'm from the U.S. Naval Academy, and I'm joined today by three of our Viper Fellows, and I'll go ahead and let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Wilson, and I am from Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology.
Hi, my name is Robin Macaluso, and I'm an associate professor at University of Texas in Arlington.
Hi, my name is Carmen Bustos-Works, and I'm a professor at Sonoma State University.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining me today. Our topic that we'll be discussing is how we mentor students in the classroom setting, when we have many students and it's less conducive to those one-on-one interactions. And so if you want to go ahead and start sharing different techniques and we'll ask questions, please feel free.
Okay, so I guess I'm going first. I started thinking about how to do this last semester. Well, it's just finished, spring 2021. And I do teach a large undergraduate class, but I was teaching a graduate level solid state class in the spring. And of course, we were virtual. And so that was an additional challenge of how to mentor students, right, in an online platform. And one of the things that I think undergraduate and graduate students alike, any kind of student, right, no matter what level, they're always interested in, how am I going to use this chemistry later? Is this going to be useful? Am I going to be able to find a job with this, etc.? And, they're also asking for networking opportunities, and they're so savvy now on how to do this with LinkedIn and Twitter. And so I was trying to create an opportunity for them to do all of these things. And so I'll share my screen with a summary of what I did. But essentially, I was trying to find the right mix of speakers, right? So we've all had speakers in class. But I wanted the speakers not just to speak about content, but about how they use science, how did they use their degree, how did they get that first job? And, career paths are not linear anymore. So I wanted the speakers to address that also. So let me just share my screen with that summary of the three speakers that I invited during the course of the semester. So you can see the screen here. Okay, good. So I invited three people I knew of various levels, and I think that the diversity was really important. One was a person named Jess Evans. He graduated with a master's degree from me. So I just used my own connections, right? Several years ago, he's now in California, employed as a chemist at Intelligent Optical Systems. We kept in touch over the years. And I knew that he had gone from one job and advanced through his career and so forth. And so he talked about how he used his master's degree and that career path after graduation and how he advanced, how he was able to use his first job to get on to the next job and what was his motivation. And then the second speaker was Dr. Palanda Watkins Curry. She graduated from the same research group that I did, but after me. We didn't cross paths, but we've met each other, networked over the years. And she's at ExxonMobil. So I was trying to diversify a little bit. So somebody now with a PhD versus a master's degree. And she did a great job. Students really loved about how she talked about how she took a solid state chemistry degree and ended up working in waxes at ExxonMobil. Okay, so she talked about her career path in a large company over the years, all the places she's moved to, all the different roles she has taken on, and then how, a PhD in chemistry in one area does not mean that you are, pigeonholed into this one topic for the rest of your life, but that your career can evolve and how it did for her. And I think it was also important that she provided the African-American perspective and also as a female in science. And then lastly, so solid state chemistry overlaps with physics quite a bit. And so I invited a professor, Jeff Lin, who's at NIST, the National Center for Neutron Scattering. So someone here who's now working at a national laboratory. and talk. And he has a much more extensive career path. Okay, he's more senior, but he could talk about just the content, a little bit of overlap with chemistry, and a little bit about how to work at a national lab. So, and what really surprised me at the end was, without my prodding, and I didn't even think of it, but they all of my students basically connected with these folks on Twitter and LinkedIn. And so that was a great way to start getting them to network with people in STEM. So that's what I had to share.
I had a question. So in your group of students, did you get the impression from talking to them that everyone saw themselves as going into a career in chemistry to begin with? And did that maybe change as a result of these speakers?
Yeah, I think a lot of them have these open questions, like they don't really know, like they have this idea that they want to pursue a path, a career in chemistry, right? But they don't know, like, how am I going to do inorganic? There's like all these perceptions of, oh, I have to do a certain kind of chemistry in order to get an industrial job. These myths, right, that kind of get passed on, and I don't know where they come from. They don't know where they come from. But this was just a way for them to interact with people who really have walked the walk, right? And they see us as professors, so they have ready access to us and talk to us all the time about that career path. But as far as industry, so I don't know really. And so this was another reason why I wanted to invite other people, because I don't know those career paths. I can read a little bit, but it's not my intimate knowledge. So I think in the end, the students really did, they voiced their opinions about how they learned so much about these career paths in chemistry, what they were really like.
This is really cool, Robin. Since you said it was an online class, was it a live seminar that they gave, or was it more where they, had Q&A sessions after watching some videos, or what was basically the format?
Oh, yeah. So it was about a 35 to 40-minute talk prepared by those speakers. And then the students basically had a Q&A session afterwards. But many of them did feel comfortable asking questions during the talk. And of course, the chat window was great at kind of lowering that barrier a little bit for them to communicate with the speakers.
Awesome, thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing this. I had a question about the LinkedIn accounts and how important you think that is for students. I think I've been really hesitant to start one for myself, and maybe that would be a good place to start as a role model to help encourage students to do this, to be able to do this networking. So I was curious about your opinion on.
Yeah, I did not even give LinkedIn a thought about this before when I started this. But afterwards, I realized that the speakers would get back to me. I would write an email thanking them for speaking to my class, and they would comment that, oh, yay, I was so happy that, your students connected with LinkedIn, that they thought that the students were proactive in, starting their career path, right, networking. And I also just combine that with the fact that they actually connected with me on LinkedIn. So I think it's a great opportunity to extend the mentoring into, developing that LinkedIn site that's so critical now, in addition to their CV, et cetera. And it also gets to think about intentional, what are you going to do with your degree? How are you going to approach your studies, your research, et cetera, so that you can advance your career?
Thanks, Robin. If you could go ahead and stop sharing your screen, we're going to go ahead and Carmen, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thank you. So I was going to talk today about a method that I use quite frequently in classes that are large classes and to facilitate discussions when we don't have as much one-on-one action. Now this I've employed mostly in in-person classes, and since teaching online has been very new for me. And these are things called quick writes. And so I'm sure these are not new techniques. This isn't a new technique for people who are interested in using more active learning in their classroom, but I think it's taken me a while to kind of really make it robust enough for me to use it with value in my classroom. So for example, I've used it in all my classes, but I'm going to talk specifically about inorganic chemistry. And since we talk a lot about inorganic chemistry in the Viper community, and for things that have a lot of rich concepts. So thinking about things like term symbols, for example, where we know students have been introduced to term symbols in physical chemistry, and we're going to talk about term symbols again in inorganic chemistry, and I want them to think about what it means conceptually to them. What if could they put those the topic into words? And so I will ask students, you know, after we have usually most of my lectures are video recorded, and then students come in and we do some group work, but before they even engage in that, that they write a 1 to 3 sentences. I'm very specific, 1 to 3 sentences to a prompt. And this, I think, gives students a chance to really get their thoughts on a piece of paper before we open it up for a discussion. And I have found this to be really valuable because when we go straight to a discussion, or if I'm leading a discussion without the students taking that time to write down their thoughts, they haven't quite formulated that. They haven't quite been able to have their own thoughts about the topic before being influenced by others. Then I have them follow up with their conceptual understanding with a second quick write. And I just let them keep those. You know, at first I was collecting them for some formative assessment, and then I found that they could just keep them. And I go back and forth between the assessment piece of it, because that's something I always struggle with. You know, but this was a chance for really for them to get those thoughts on paper.
Thanks so much, Robin. We were talking about the assessment part of that, and I was envisioning using something like this in my class and thinking, oh my, I can see that my students would be writing these down in the 5 minutes before class. So do you think that with this structure going throughout your course that they are taking like time the night before to do them, or do you think it's more of a last minute, oh no, I don't remember what I needed to do before class today? Like, what sort of time frame do you think they're spending on this?
Oh, yeah, so that's a really good question. So I have them do it in class. So I have them come to class, and then, you know, we're having, you know, you watched the videos. And not that it's necessarily, it could be a check to make sure they watch the videos, right? You know, depending on how you wanted to use that. But now we've thought about that. Here's the prompt. Take 5 minutes here to write 1 to 3 sentences. And sometimes 5 minutes is a long time. That might even be too long, right? They probably don't need 5 minutes. Maybe it's, you know, when you're doing it and you're sitting there for the 5 minutes, it seems like forever. Like, oh my God, I've got to stop this. And you can kind of see, you know, people are writing and then they stop writing. But I have them do it in class, because then they're sitting there, they have a quiet space. And then people also want to talk after that, you know, because they've gotten something on paper and now they're ready to really verbalize their understanding of concepts.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, so I had a question for you, Carmen, because I've tried to incorporate some quick writes or exercises like this in my class. And so you had mentioned prompts, and I kind of thought about prompts too. And I don't know if I have the answer, but what kind of, I wanted to maybe get your experience on this. What kind of prompts are the ones that get the students to write the best quick writes, to write the most thoughtful quick writes?
That's a great question. I think we could probably, even in the Viper community, come up with just a whole page on prompts. Right? Because it's really difficult to come up with good prompts. So for example, I have a prompt for the term symbol example, which is, can you make an analogy between term symbols and quantum numbers? You know, and maybe that's not the best prompt in the world, but it gets them thinking about the connection between those two pieces of quantum mechanics. But I think coming up with those prompts are difficult. And I think that would be, I think it's valuable though. And I think it's something that we could invest time in as a community, as a Viper community, and coming up with these prompts that could really help, you know, spark those student thoughts. Also, I think just getting them to write a sentence down will help them understand that they haven't maybe made the jump from the mathematical piece to the conceptual piece and find their holes. So for the quick write, that's the most important piece. What are your conceptual holes? And if they write down a few sentences, they start to see those. Regardless, even if the prompt is not as good as it could be.
Sure. So it's a little bit of self-assessment.
Yeah, it's some self-assessment. Exactly. That's really good way of putting it.
Okay, thanks.
Well, I think we have a great idea for a conversation in the Discord to come up with good prompts that take those mathematical, you know, skills and ideas and have them be put into like the conceptual. So I'm looking forward to that discussion happening when this video is out. Stephanie, would you like to go ahead and share next?
Yes, so I'm going to talk about something that I did in we're on a quarter system. So this fall quarter, I had just had a baby and I went completely online with all of the COVID mess that was happening. So it was a completely online, asynchronous. I had both Gen Chem and inorganic. And since you both focused on inorganic, I think I'll focus more on the general chemistry side. We're a primarily undergraduate institution, so my class was 24 and maybe 26 students, and almost exclusively non-chemistry majors. So engineering students by and large. And with the asynchronous, trying to make sure that they're actually actively engaged and seeing that there's a point to the things that they're learning, I really struggled with how I could do that. And what I ultimately did was have required office hours twice a week for 20 minutes. And I would meet with a third of the class in a Microsoft Teams meeting. And either I would have some sort of a prompt prepared where we would, like, I would say, okay, well, how would we solve this question? And we'd go through it rather rapidly. Or I'd open it up for questions, or, you know, some weeks as things got bad, we just had mental health checks like, hey, you're there? Is everybody doing okay? Anybody need to talk about anything? I know this is on the books for 15 minutes, but let's take off. Everybody's good. Go use this 15 minutes and go outside. And so that was a nice structured way. You know, I took attendance, but at the same point, it was really just letting them know that they had somebody who was on their side and rooting for them in this.
First of all, congratulations on your new baby. I think that's wonderful. And
thank you.
I wonder to what extent you felt, sorry, that's very loud. To what extent you felt you could share how you were and what your struggles were like? Because I know for a lot of us, you know, sharing in that personal way is not always easy. It's not always easy for me.
No, I would completely agree. It was not always easy. And as the quarter went on, and I got to know more of the students in our short discussions more and more, I think that it got easier and easier. And by the end of the quarter, it's a 10-week quarter, the last one I made completely optional, and I had students come in and just shoot the breeze with me. And I had complained about my son not sleeping at various times. And one of them came back and said, you know, I asked my mom if I slept as a baby, and she said that I never slept. And when you told me that I needed to go back and tell my mother, thank you, apparently you were right. It's like, I know you were right. So it was, that was really rewarding. It wasn't all 26 students, but there were certainly ones, and I think he's like a computer science major, but there was a way to get a personal connection that at the beginning, I think everybody thought like, okay, why are we doing this? Why are you making me come in? But it was a reminder that I was invested in their learning.
Yeah, so Stephanie, if you don't mind, I have a question. So did the students were in groups, right? with you. So did you intentionally form those groups, or was it random? How did that work? And maybe it was different for Gen Chem, maybe when the students maybe knew each other less versus inorganic, or maybe they had already known each other through previous courses.
Right. So I can speak to both the students in Gen Chem who did not know each other and the ones in Inorg who did. In general chemistry, I had students from across the globe, and I was trying to manage our schedules. So some of the people at my institution who did completely online allowed themselves to work at nights to work with the schedules from other countries. And I asked for a specific hour on the books. And then I sent out a poll and had the students rank their choices. And when it came down to deciding between, if 10 people wanted in one section and then I only had room for 8, I also looked at their schedules and saw when they had other things and kind of just made some judgment calls. I also tried to make sure that there was good representation of different ethnicities or different like genders and things like that. And then for the Inorg students where there was more heavy knowledge of each other, the groups were much smaller. So we, some of them were only 3 or 4 students. And so I tried to keep, if there was a female, I tried to keep 2 females in. I tried to like basically confer with my colleagues on groups where they thought, ooh, I wouldn't put the 2 of those together, or, this person is going to help bring this person along. And so I tried to defer to some of the knowledge that my colleagues had on that.
I had a question about cameras. So when you had your office hours, were people generally have their cameras on or off, and how did you have a policy about that or encourage people one way or the other? And I guess I'm asking too, because I taught an asynchronous intro chem class in the fall, and during my office hours, nobody would turn on their camera. It was kind of lonely,
Yes. It was most noticeable in my general chemistry because it would be about 8, 9 students in these 4 different 15-minute meetings. I mean, it was bang, 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 bang. If you do this, I recommend at least 20. 15 was rather short to get much accomplished, but my inorgs were 20 and that felt really good. But I did not have a policy. My institution encouraged us to not have a policy on that. And like you said, I had some where all of the students would turn on their cameras and we would have a nice personal connection in that way. And then I had one group that never turned on their cameras. And I would say, well, I'm talking to your letters right now, because on Teams, it's, their initials. And it's nice to see your initials today. But I agree. I found that was very isolating, but I did not ever have any policy. I didn't necessarily think that was appropriate, or they could have reasons that they didn't want to have it on. So I decided it was my duty to pick up that.
Well, thank you to all our fellows for joining us today for this nanoCHAT. I just wanted to also thank our YouTube audience who's watching this video later, and want to remind everyone that the conversation continues through our Discord channel, the Viper Pit. So please let us know if you haven't joined and would like to join, and we'll get you all set up. But in the meantime, thank you to everyone, and we hope to see you soon.